Have you ever felt cornered, with the impression that countless challenges or people are turning against you? Life, with its complexities, often places us in situations where it seems we are outnumbered or that difficulties multiply around us. It's in these moments that the voice of worry can shout loudest. But Psalm 3, in its 6th verse, offers us a declaration of courage that defies the logic of fear. I will not be afraid of many thousands of people who have set themselves against me all around. This powerful phrase, uttered by David in a scenario of deep adversity, is not an act of irresponsible bravado, but an expression of unshakable faith. David was, in fact, surrounded by thousands. His own son, Absalom, had raised a gigantic army and turned against him, and many of his former supporters had abandoned him. The threat was real, visible, and overwhelming. Yet, amidst this terrifying reality, David declares that he will not be afraid. How is this possible? The answer lies in his certainty of divine protection, which he had already affirmed in previous verses, and which gave him a perspective that went beyond what his eyes could see. The thousands in our lives, fears and challenges. When the psalmist speaks of thousands of people who have set themselves against me and surround me, he is using vivid language to describe the magnitude of the threat. For us in our own journey, these thousands may not be literal armies, but they represent the overwhelming pressures we feel, the challenges that seem insurmountable, and the voices, external or internal, that try to diminish and paralyze us. What are these thousands in your life? Financial worries, bills accumulating, inflation eroding purchasing power, economic instability that seems to surround you on all sides, generating anxiety about the future, health challenges, an unexpected diagnosis, chronic pain that insists on remaining, the natural aging process that brings its own limitations, making fragility feel like a multitude surrounding well-being, interpersonal conflicts, family disagreements that seem endless, friends who drift away, colleagues who create a hostile environment, leaving the feeling that we are isolated and under attack, self-criticism and insecurities, those persistent thoughts that tell us we are not good enough, that we have failed, that we don't deserve happiness. These internal voices can be the hardest thousands to face as they reside in our own minds. The pressure of time, the feeling that the clock is ticking, that time is running out to achieve dreams, that there are too many things to do and too little energy or opportunity, which can generate a sense of constant oppression. Consider Donna Lucia's story. At 55, she found herself in the midst of a profound restructuring at the company where she had dedicated almost her entire professional life. Suddenly, her position was eliminated, and the uncertainty of re-entering the job market for someone her age became a terrifying thousand that surrounded her. Friends and family with the best intentions would say, "It's very difficult to find something now, Lucia. The market is brutal." Every newspaper article about unemployment, every job opening that asked for young and dynamic, added to her thousands, amplifying the fear of not being able to get back on her feet. The nights were long, and anxiety about the future seemed like an invisible army besieging her peace. She felt alone against a world that seemed to have changed its rules. The choice of courage, I will not be afraid. The declaration, I will not be afraid, is not the result of denying reality. David was not naive. He knew the size of the threat. This statement arises from a deep conviction that there is a greater force on his side. It is an active choice, a decision not to allow fear to dictate his steps or imprison his soul. In a world where we are constantly bombarded by frightening news and uncertainties, choosing not to be afraid is an act of faith and resilience. Think of Mr. Eduardo. He had struggled his whole life to build a small fortune for his family. However, an unexpected health crisis, with extremely high medical expenses and the inability to work, transformed his financial security into a mountain of worries. With each collection call, each new prescription, he felt the thousands of financial anxiety and physical fragility surrounding him. The fear of no longer being able to support his family was a heavy burden, a constant enemy that threatened his peace. In a moment of despair, while watching his grandchildren play, a childhood memory of faith teachings came to his mind. He remembered the promise that he would not be alone. It was not an immediate miracle, but a subtle shift in his perspective. He began to focus on what he could control, seeking information, talking to doctors, reorganizing finances with his family's help. The declaration, I will not be afraid, manifested in his ability to face the situation one day at a time, to seek help without shame, to find small victories in daily life. Not fearing did not mean that fear completely disappeared, but that it did not paralyze him. It was the choice to stand up and fight, supported by the certainty that he was not alone in this battle. This courage comes from trusting in a protection that transcends the visible. The psalm reminds us that even when challenges multiply and seem to surround us, God's presence is an unshakable bulwark. It is not a promise of the absence of enemies, but of an inner peace that allows us not to be overcome by them. It is the ability to lift our heads and declare that despite the magnitude of the threat, the greatness of faith is even greater. The presence that breaks the siege, the foundation of courage. David's courage to not be afraid was not an isolated strength, but came from his deep dependence on God. In previous verses of Psalm 3, he had already declared, "But you, Lord, are a shield around me, my glory, and the lifter of my head." I cried aloud to the Lord, and he answered me from his holy mountain. It is from this certainty of protection, restored dignity, and heard prayer that the boldness to face the thousands arises. The absence of fear is not irrationality, but rather a well-founded trust. It is the knowledge that behind the visible thousands there is a greater invisible force that sustains us. For Donna Lucia, this certainty manifested in her decision not to isolate herself. She sought refresher courses, activated her network of contacts, and above all, drew inspiration from her faith to persevere. She found a new career perspective she hadn't imagined before, in a field that allowed her to apply her experience differently. The thousands of doubt and rejection were dispelled by perseverance, and the conviction that her journey was being guided. For Mr. Eduardo, his declaration of not being afraid translated into the strength to accept his family's help, something his pride had previously made difficult. He allowed the affection and support of his loved ones to become part of the divine shield, realizing that God's sustenance often manifests through human love and solidarity. He did not overcome his illness by an instant miracle, but gained peace to deal with it, and found a new way to value family ties which had previously gone unnoticed in his work routine. The lesson of Psalm 3:6 is a warm reminder that the battle is not ours but God's. It does not mean that we will be spared from confronting the thousands in our lives, but that we do not need to fear them because we do not face them alone. The divine presence is the bulwark that breaks the siege, that transforms fear into courage and vulnerability into strength. It is the certainty that even when everything around us seems to conspire against us, there is a loving presence that surrounds and protects us. Selah, the pause of courage and trust. And as in other moments of the psalm, we are invited to the reflective pause of Selah. After David's powerful declaration of not fearing, this pause compels us to internalize the truth. It is an invitation to stop and consider the magnitude of this trust amidst adversity. What are the thousands that surround your peace today? Have you allowed their fear to paralyze you? Where have you sought your strength and refuge? Selah encourages us not just to read about David's courage, but to practice it in our own lives. It's a call to take a deep breath, acknowledge the threats, yes, but then deliberately choose not to fear them, because our trust is anchored in something much greater than any problem or thousand that may surround us. It is the moment to solidify the faith that God's presence is the shield that allows us to move forward, even when the path is full of obstacles and the enemy seems numerous. Therefore, when life presents its thousands, when challenges seem to pile up and the voices of fear try to suffocate your hope, remember Psalm 3:6. It is not a denial of reality, but a declaration of faith. May you find in its words the courage to say with a strengthened soul, "I will not be afraid of many thousands of people who have set themselves against me all around. For in God, victory over fear is already assured, and his embrace is the safest refuge in any storm."